Okay, let's broaden the debate now and look at what Europe specifically as a whole is doing about migration, an issue that's often presented as a crisis and a problem. Charlie Yaxley is in Geneva. He's the spokesperson for Asia and Europe at the UN Refugee Agency. From Abbeville in France, we have Patricia Chagnon, a member of the National Rally, the party formerly known as the National Front. Patricia, let me start with you. We ended the last section talking about the politics of fear and how people are concerned about the other being migrants who are coming to Europe. Donald Trump said it just a few weeks ago that it is distorting, I'm paraphrasing him, distorting European culture. And of course, he means white culture. Viktor Orban, the leader of Hungary, says it is devaluing Christian values, these migrants coming to the country. Poland, Hungary, Austria, very much against migrants. Your party in France, very concerned about migration. What are you scared of?
We are not scared of migrants in themselves. We apprehend the sheer numbers, the incessant influx of migrants that keep coming and keep coming. This is actually disrupting our economic balance. It's disrupting our social systems, the burden on, for example, our hospital care, our social welfare. It is also putting a threat to our cultural identity, as we see in dress codes, in different religions working together. Now, this would all not be a problem because France has known influx of many different continents into France who have adapted very well. But it's the sheer numbers today and the people waiting to come. Africa is full of people looking for a better future. And that is all very legitimate. But France, Europe, just doesn't have the room, the possibility to be taking in the whole of Africa. So it is the sheer numbers that are posing a problem. And of course, but I suppose we will talk about that in a minute, the way this whole crisis is being handled by our politicians, by the EU, and by the humanitarian organizations. I will emphasize, though, that we are most sensitive about the human disaster that's taking place, that we are absolutely awfully touched by what's happening in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
But we do see different solutions.
Patricia, you mentioned the numbers. The number of illegal migrants in Italy is 600,000. That's less than 1% of the country's entire population. The figures in France, that's probably what, about 300,000 to 400,000 in the country of 65 million people. Are you seriously concerned about less than 1% of your country's population?
I dispute those numbers. I fully dispute those numbers.
The numbers in Italy are absolutely correct and verified. The numbers in France are less certain.
Numbers in France. France is having at the moment an influx of about the size of the Aquarius boat coming into France every single day. And you just have to walk around France, around the countryside, to see how disruptive it is. Shanty towns are going up in Paris. Shanty towns are up in Calais. No one can get rid of those. Migrants are being dispersed all over villages in France. And it's causing a horrendous disruption to life in France. And crime rates are going up. It is causing major disruption. I dispute the numbers that you're citing for France because it just doesn't match up with the reality that we live every day. And if you'd come to Paris, you'd see it for yourself.
Okay. Charlie, what do you make of the EU's continuing failure to reach a collective deal about how to deal with migration? Many people accept that Italy and Greece in particular, the two main entry points across the Mediterranean, are not receiving the help they need from the rest of the EU. Why can't this bloc make a decision?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to put what's happening on the Mediterranean this year into context. It's no longer a situation that we had in previous years. For example, in 2015, when 1 million people arrived in Europe, the figures are far, far lower. This year, it's around 60,000 people that have crossed the Mediterranean. So these numbers are manageable, and it's a question of political will. But what we need to move away from is countries acting on their own, unilaterally, instead of working collaboratively together to develop a harmonized European approach. And it is those countries like Italy, Greece, and Spain that have been at the forefront of receiving arrivals, but this isn't something any one country can tackle alone. What's needed is for European countries to come together based on the values of which the European Union was founded on human rights and in solidarity, to come forward and develop a fair and equitable distribution for hosting asylum seekers and refugees in Europe.
Which countries around the world, Charlie, in your experience with the UNHCR, have a workable model to deal with new arrivals, one that integrates them and doesn't threaten whatever the fears are within that host nation? Which countries provide a good example?
Well, there's 90% of the world's refugees are being hosted in developing countries. So actually, when we talk about Europe's ability to receive and integrate refugees, it's really worth putting that into context. I mean, you have countries such as Uganda, which are resource poor, that have received more than 1 million refugees from South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Burundi, and other states. But what they've done is they've continued to allow open borders, but the refugees live side by side with host communities. And they're able to access public services, they're able to work and seek employment. And what this does is it not only more closely integrates refugees with their host communities culturally, but it also allows the refugees to make a positive economic contribution to their local economies. Because more than anything, what refugees want is that they didn't choose to flee their home. They just want somewhere safe where they can rebuild their lives, support their families, and live somewhere in peace.
Patricia, many people think that it's a pull factor, the fact that there are these rescue ships going around the Mediterranean pulling people out of the sea. But the International Committee for the Red Cross and Red Crescents, it says that that's too simple, that people don't make that calculation for the journey that they are going to make. And also, the other issue is that many people think that this migration issue is not going away anytime soon at all. There'll be many other factors which will push people out of their countries, whether it be war, famine, or climate change, or whatever else it might be. Isn't it time to now start being more constructive rather than destructive in terms of facing this issue?
I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree that the humanitarian crisis is absolutely appalling and cannot go on. I also am happy to hear that you acknowledge that this is not ready to end, that many more will be coming. Now, first of all, I think it's very important that we we need to get rid of the myth that all these migrants are fleeing famine or war. There are a lot of economic migrants between those people. And as I said before, Europe is incapable of giving a future to them all. France has 7 million unemployed people and 10 million living between the poverty line of the people already in our country. We just don't have the means to do any more. What we should be doing, however, is looking how we can stop it. Now, let me get this clear once again. Any boat in distress with people on the Mediterranean, yes, humanitarian organizations, we are grateful that they're looking after them. But they should be bringing them back to the coast in Africa, where we as Europeans, with the international community and with international help organizations, should be constructing villages and places where these people can be safe, fed, educated, have medical care. We would require in those villages that any refugee applications would be made to Europe from the soil in Africa. We would also then close our borders to make absolutely sure that no illegal immigrants can get into Europe by crossing it and using the illegal channels, which are funneling a mafia of traffickers, of human traffickers, which are appalling. You've heard about the prostitution, you've heard about migrants being sold in Spain. This has to stop. Now, the problem I understand very well of the humanitarian organizations that they're caught between two fires. They're caught between one, the absolute need of helping people who are in distress and who are drowning on the Mediterranean, and they have to do that. But we need to, as European community and as an international community, get our heads around the fact that we need to help these people in Africa, like we used to do in the 80s when we had the famine in Sudan and in Eritrea, the war in Sudan and famine in Eritrea. We all remember Aid for Africa, Bob Geldof. I was there at the time. And at the time, refugees, the massive refugees, the millions of refugees in Eritrea and in the south of Sudan were hosted in refugee camps in Sudan. Well, I knew the ones in Sudan and Eritrea at the time where they were being taken care of and prepared to go back to their countries when safe and when possible to do so. What is happening today, and I'll conclude on that, is that we are draining the African continent of young, healthy males that need to be there in rebuilding their country. We are letting a mafia get installed, making money off these poor people, and we have the problem of the amount of people, just of the sheer masses of people. And let me speak for France, coming to France, where we absolutely cannot take care of them. We need to address this issue, and we need to address the issue with ONGs, because we expect that not all of them are actually following the rules. Some of them are actually most probably not following the rules.
Patricia, Chagnon and Charlie Yaxley, thank you for joining us on the Newsmakers.